There we go. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode or stream, whatever it is that we do, of Lyrebird Edits. Wow, my brain is just not working tonight. So hopefully I can be my usual merry self while we go on our way to... Where were we last time? I think here. So, hello everyone, hi. I'm going to be waking up a little bit, hopefully with the help of some tea. But I don't think I'll be streaming for too long tonight. Partly because, as you can see, I'm quite zombie-like. For no particular reason, I'm feeling good. I'm just slightly zombie-like. I guess it's excusable because I'm, like, 2 months out of supposedly handing in my thesis. And if you've ever met anyone who's done a PhD or is doing a PhD, they will tell you that this is the hardest part of the thesis writing. Like the hardest part of the whole PhD, they'll tell you it's writing the thesis. I'm not firmly in that camp. I feel as though I've already overcome a lot of the hurdles, and what's going to come between now and when I finish is more of a concentrated effort just to put everything into words. But I like words. It's what I'm doing here. Ooh, someone just joined the server. Good. Hello, new person who joined the server. Hi. I feel like your first impression of me may be perhaps not so representative of what I try and be on stream. You might just be catching me on a slightly sleepier night. But what we do on Lyrebird Edits is we get people's stories and we go through them line by line, paragraph by paragraph, page by page. And I'll do a bit of a mixture of edits. Sometimes I will make developmental edits, highlight a section, comment on it, comment out loud. Sometimes I will... where's an example? This has been more of a developmental edit that I've worked through, but there were a couple of points, like here, where I cut a section and explain why, or I do a bit of, not so much rewriting, just like a demonstration of something that I may have been talking about. So, yeah, that's what we're all about here. It's fiction editing. Hasn't got quite the same sex appeal as like a Dark Souls speedrun, but it gets the heart pumping occasionally, like when I have to choose a color for my highlighter. That sends everyone wild. It's a real crowd pleaser, that one. So yeah, welcome to the stream. But yeah, just going back to complaining about a PhD for a little while. I think maybe because everyone who does that sort of length of research work, which is, 3 years, they're so used to doing more and more and more of it that they find it a bit difficult to stop at a certain point and to draw a line in the sand and go, okay, I need to start writing. And then kicking themselves into the writing phase is usually quite difficult, just because they're not used to doing it. So that's why a lot of students often complain that the tail end of a PhD is the most difficult part. But I don't know. Maybe for me the most difficult part of the PhD was the first year when I was struggling quite a lot with the direction of the thesis and the body of work that I was doing, and I got quite disillusioned with it. So I stopped and did a year's worth of work and came back to the PhD and did something related but a little bit different. So maybe it's different for different people. Horses for courses. Bam, I had that one saved up. But no one was here to comment first. Oh, OutriderSG. This time it is me who is first. Oh well, so we're actually doing one of our regular stories tonight. This is OutriderSG, and I think we're actually fairly close to the end. I think there's about another 800 words, if I remember correctly from last time. Word count, 857, very nice, very good. So, I think that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. And just as a little summary, in case anyone's watching this for the first time, or if you're coming sideways into tonight's edit, this is chapter 3 of Outrider's story, and we've been working through chapters 1 and 2 in previous streams. Tonight we're dealing with chapter 3, and the very last section of it. This chapter has focused a lot on Leanna, who's a character that we've been introduced to 17 years after the events of chapters 1 and 2. So we've had a time skip at the very front of this story here. And we were talking about how the past and present events work together to create almost like a dual narrative structure, where you start off by talking about something in the present tense, and then you flip back into the past, push back into the present, and you can kind of weave the story backwards and forwards this way. So, without further ado, I might as well start the edit. I don't think Outrider's gonna pop on tonight. So, we'll go through this, and I guess, depending on how we go, I don't think we'll be editing for too long tonight. I've got another story to work with on Sunday. Hello, Wacky Goblin. Good to see you again. Because I know who you are. Thank you for the well wishes. You should be asleep. Also, you'll note I've disabled YouTube comments, Wacky Goblin. Now I wonder why I had to do that. But yeah, thank you for the well wishes. Alright, so I think we got up to here. Yeah, you saw. Good. The last part of this scene that we were dealing with had Leanna encountering the Outriders. The Outriders are the alien species that have invaded Earth, and she made it to the moon. She keeps them shuffling around. She is on the search for water in this chapter. That's kind of been the driving force of what we've seen so far. She comes to an abandoned town. She moves inside an office, finds a bottle of water, and then as she's moving around in the structure, she hears the aliens arrive outside. And in her escape, she cut her palm on a piece of glass. So what's happening here right now is that I think she manages to escape, and she's sort of looking back, and I think she's about to have an encounter with them. So let's read. I'll go from here again. Leanna took a deep breath, then swung her legs forward and quietly proceeded down the mound of cinder blocks and steel, but immediately something felt off. The whole pile felt shaky, less stable than before. Not again. The explosion must have shaken something loose. Same as before, the heap began to give way. Abandoning caution, Leanna leapt from the rubble. She tumbled as she landed, but managed to roll out of it and back onto her feet. She looked back. The pile had imploded, folding inside out. Oh, they definitely heard that, she said, a grimace on her face. And the context of this is that she is going within the structure out to the window. I mean, she escapes outside. Now, she could see the Outriders parked on the east end of the building where the double doors used to be. They swayed and bucked as they hovered, alive with electric bolts in a tangle of blue and violet spark. That's a bit of a run-on there. A series of circular cells lined the undercarriage of each, and the lightning swirled and crackled. arcing between the nodes. None of the machine's components look new or even well maintained. Most of the inner workings were left exposed, covered in soot and grime, rattling with eager intent as the vehicle hummed in idle fury. Now, if we go up a little bit more, Sean's actually provided a visual inspiration for what I just read out was. I remember at the very end of the last stream talking a bit about this contraption here, this sort of hoverbike cross like anti-gravity monstrosity. It's really cool. So this is the first time in the story where we actually see this. Now, earlier on in this chapter, we had a moment where the noise from these machines was it became apparent and startled the main character. From that, you're off. I've bored you to tears. We'll catch you later, okay? Enjoy the school holidays. So from that, they we only had like an auditory clue as to what these structures were, and it turns out they're kind of like hover motorbikes. I remember at the end of last stream not getting a very solid mental image of what it is that we were dealing with. So the last comment I made was, I like the individual parts of this description, but my first impression is hazy. I didn't know that the Outriders were human. This is the name of the alien species. So when we have written here they, I pictured people. Should you instead declare, I mean, this is my suggestion, declare that this thing that she is seeing as the vehicle first, and then load the descriptions. So what I mean by that is something a bit like a really sort of solid, quick, concise, this is a motorbike. She could see the Outriders parked on the east end of the building where the double doors used to be. Two machines. Two monstrous pieces of hover technology. Throwing something like that in, and I'll stress that you don't necessarily need to follow that word for word. I always say this with my suggestions, but just reiterating it. You don't need anything particularly fancy. You just need something that grounds in the reader's mind. Oh, yep, yeah, okay, I'm gonna get like a description of a hovercraft, yep. Not bored, just tired. Good, good. That's what you want to be for a school holiday. Definitely you shouldn't be bored. It's a fun time. But yeah, thank you. See, this is the kind of nephew content that I'm really after. Much nicer than last time they raided my stream and called me awful names. Tear. Then, when you have a sentence like they swayed and bucked as they hovered, then it makes more sense what the they is, and why it's swaying and bucking. Swaying and bucking are almost animalistic too, so, I sort of want to add a little addendum here, as though alive, rearing with animosity. Animosity doesn't relate to biology or bucking and swaying, but it sounds like animal, so it's one of those weird kind of, not quite a homonym, but like a, and I've used the word auditory again, but yeah, it's an auditory trigger, so you associate animosity with like bad behavior, I suppose, or foul intention, but because it's got the word anima there, it kind of sounds like animal. Maybe that's a good suggestion, but the point is though that this kind of works as an adjunct to the first because it gives it a bit more emotional juice rather than just like a physical description of what's going on. Now that being said, I also want to go back and talk a little bit about this paragraph. Leanna took a deep breath and swung her legs forward and quietly proceeded down the mound of cinder blocks and steel, but immediately something felt off. Quite a long sentence, right? Phrase 1, 2, 3, conjunction, and then like a resolution here. What I'd suggest doing is getting rid of the comma there, replacing it with a full stop. You could even get rid of but immediately. So for instance, you just have that. And just even have something felt off. If you can shorten these kind of emotional U-turns, it's a lot more effective, especially if it's in its own sentence. So new sentence and shorter is a really great way to pivot from one frame of emotion into a second frame of emotion. So yeah, that's what I suggest there. I also get rid of quietly because I think it may be a little bit out of place for the again the emotion in this scene. The whole pile felt shaky, less stable than before because she went up this ramp. Not again. The explosion must have shaken something loose. Same as before, the heap began to give way. Abandoning caution, Leanna leapt from the rubble. This is quite a long. It's really only like the equivalent of 2 lines, but it feels like it's taking a little while to get there. So, for example, the explosion must have shaken something loose. We can kind of piece together if we don't have it there. Same as before, the heap began to give way. Same as before, maybe it reads a little too literal. Maybe it reads it too literal and out of the moment, especially because we have a began to verb. Maybe something like see, even something like sure enough the heap began to the heap gave way. It has that sure enough at the start, and I don't like that. I don't like the 1 2. I just want it to be the heap gave way, or underfoot the heap. Even that sort of doesn't have the same velocity. Less stable than before. Not again. Oh, maybe underfoot. And then you have something like this. So what I've suggested is underfoot the heap shifted. I'm okay with that, I think. Once again, abandoning caution, Leanna leapt from the rubble. I think that's a bit stronger and a bit more immediate. She tumbled as she landed, but managed to roll out of it and back onto her feet. That's okay. It's like a video game sort of maneuver. She looked back. The pile had imploded, folding inside out. That's quite decent. Folding inside out. Maybe you could suggest this instead. Perhaps you could suggest this instead through the use of a plume of smoke or something to that effect. Like a surge of dust and plaster hit Leanna in the face. As a structure folded inside out. Something like that. That makes it a bit more action focused. She could see how They swayed and bucked as they hovered, as though alive, rearing with animosity alive. Electric bolts in a tangle of blue and violet spark. I'd replace that with something like electric bolts. Or saying in a tangle, saying in violent arcs of. I guess the point of this edition here is this placeholder, but maybe you can personify the object and make it do something. The electric bolt saying slash cracked slash cut the air, etc., etc. Lots you can do, and I think that makes it more alive. It sort of imbues it with a bit of, how to say, presence. A series of circular cells lined the undercarriage of each, and the lightning swirled and crackled. So you got crackled there, arching between the nodes. So again, you don't want to double up the image, but I think I had this in my mind as I was writing that. None of the machine's components looked new or even well maintained. Most of the inner workings were left exposed, covered in soot and grime. Rattling with eager intent as the vehicle hummed in idle fury. I like these descriptions, but can't help but feel that you can describe these further along in the scene, perhaps during a chase or when they actually move. You can show their decrepitude. In addition, the inclusion of these two sentences saps away the opportunity for some emotional reflection. How does Leanna feel about seeing these bestial machines? Like a declaration of Leanna shits her pants, like, for instance, but like in a more ornate and fluffy kind of thing. That's what we're all about. Nice and fluffy. But yeah, like after this kind of description of the machine, you personify it a little bit, and then you sing it home with this notion that Leanna stands there feeling the raw power of these magnificent contraptions sting her eyes, their mechanical grunts crumbling the foundations of her bones. Like, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff, but I feel as though it needs that emotional stick at the end. Otherwise, it's just oh yeah, Leanna's standing there, and yeah, they're the Outriders. So that's something that might be missing from this paragraph here. It's just a sense of emotional connection. Though twice the size of any sedan, each vehicle supported only a single rider, most of the space taken up by a cage mounted on the rear. I think that's a fragment there. The metal had oxidized and ran maroon, caked in dry blood. On the front seat sat a pair of twin, wide-bore cannons that spanned the length of the machine. Mounted beneath them were two angled rails, a series of cylindrical nodes sweeping back along each of them. A luminescent canister sat center between the rails, sparkling azure with dormant electricity waiting to crack free. The lesson was solidified. The trap had been sprung. The lesson was solidified, the trap sprung. How stupid Leanna felt to have ignored her instincts, her training. The only option left to her was to run. Only moments had separated her from them, and now the hunt was on, and she, the prey, she'd witnessed the brutality of their weapons only once before, but it was enough. The way their victims writhed, suffering the icy grip of an invisible hand, choking the life from them. Impossible to forget. She was not eager to experience it firsthand, and so she began to climb. This paragraph here is a neat paragraph, and I like the descriptions. Descriptions. I worry though that because we've already spent one paragraph describing these machines, this one only serves to block the total flow of the pace. Leanna has just, in a story sense, Leanna has just escaped the building and a ledge fall or a ledge collapse, only to discover that, oh no, there are bad boys over there. Pause. 2-paragraph description of the Outriders. Then continue. So, I think that this structure grinds the action slash emotion to a halt for the sake of like, I'm gonna put it in brackets, cool, but unnecessary. But at this point here, unnecessary detail. Just give me a sec, just checking a few things. It's actually kind of nice to have a quiet evening. I miss everyone in stream chat. It's probably a good night to have a rather slow stream because my energy levels are dipping. But the tea's been good, so at the start of the stream I was a bit low, and I think for the past like 25 minutes that was quite a good sort of focused piece of editing. But yeah, what I'm really trying to justify to myself is like, oh no, no viewers, but don't worry, I'm taking that in my stride and being like, yeah, no, this is totally fine. I'm tired anyway. I don't need viewers. Oh. Anyway. And then there are other nights where there's like 9 people watching at once and they're all typing and I'm like back and forward, back and forward. So yeah, the variety is nice. But please come back. So then we have this little addendum here, which can be summarized as, oh shit, I better get running. he'd witnessed the brutality of their weapons only once before, but it was enough. So here we have that past present thing coming back into play. The dual structure. Ugh, I didn't spell that properly. The dual structure of a story. Like, you can kind of rip your reader out of an intense scene and give them a little backstory, but I don't know if there's a good reason to do that. Every time when I've seen this happen in other people's stories, I've always sort of thought to myself, look, it'd probably be better just to stay focused on where we are in the current scene. Perhaps here, because it's a... It's and feeling emotions too. I feel as though the narrator takes almost sort of, I wouldn't say perverse pleasure, but the way that the narrator is dealing with Leanna is almost in a slightly removed fashion. Like, Leanna is experiencing these events, and the narrator is not particularly close to her, or think of it another way, the camera isn't right up in Leanna's face. It's more sort of in the back of the scene. It's taking in the whole scope of what's going on, but in addition, the voice of the narrator is coming through, and it's weaving a softer touch to the story. It's not so much like Leanna can feel the adrenaline kick hard into her stomach as she takes in the fearsome sight of these horrible machines, like beasts they roar in the low twilight of evening, monstrously large, with cannons as thick as tree trunks. Leanna feels the fear bite hard into her. She must run. She runs. So everything I just said then is a sort of summation of here to here, but done a little more, I suppose, in a condensed fashion with a bit more emotion. I feel as though that's what this needs. It needs that kind of treatment, where it's not so much... but then again, I don't want to tread on the narrative style, because this has been consistent throughout. And I suppose it's up to Outrider as well, what kind of story Outrider wants to tell. Because the narrative voice is something that I can advise on, but ultimately I don't want to, like, change for my own personal view or taste. I can just advise and give feedback on how it appears. Actually, I might write that out, what I just said. Not so much so that Outrider can copy it, but just so we can kind of see what it would look like if... She tumbles back. Oh, they definitely heard that. She said a grimace on her face. I've already used the word fearsome. Um, something like this, for instance, it's in parts it's weaker. But what this lacks, is fleshed out descriptions. What this lacks is fleshed out descriptions and perhaps in addition, it also overrides the narrative voice, the sense of the narrator having control over how the story is told. It's a much more Leanna focused kind of event, whereas the writing style has so far been geared more towards a narrator is in control kind of vibe. I can't, yeah, again, as I was saying, as I said over stream, I can't really tell you which one is right to use because that's your choice. And that's not like a subtle backhanded way of saying, but you should choose mine. What I'm saying is that there are different ways that you can tell the same event. You have the same sort of A, B, C, D elements, but the way in which the narrator talks about them is quite different, to different effect as well. Have a think now about how these two different events are received with their different narrative voices. Alternatively, you may prefer the more immediate voice, and perhaps incorporate some of these elements into your style. This one's more of a light suggestion, but I think that starting this process of how are the words received will help you during subsequent edits. What it will do is it'll prevent you from going through the story and being like, yep, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. All the events are there. It's done, right? I suppose it's not no, for subsequent edits, like I'm talking about once you've polished the structure of the events up, it's good to go through and consider how the story is being told and what effect it has, not so much on the actual events of the story, but in the narrative delivery. Yeah, so again, I'm not saying right like this, I'm just saying that this is an interesting way to reconfigure the events. Because all the events are basically the same, with the addition of a description here. One addition I would suggest. A vagui. A vague, one-shot description of the monsters. We don't want to reveal them too early, of course, and give them too much of a well-rounded approach, but we need to get Leanna out of there really quickly and give a sense of what the threat actually looks like. She clambered up the hill, desperately clawing at the loose dirt, praying to summit before they could find her. Technically correct, that's a verb. The soil, I think it's a verb. I think you can use the word summit as a verb. Yeah? Not Wikipedia. Wiktionary. Okay. Wiktionary. Help me, Wiktionary. You're my only hope. A Star Wars reference. English. Noun. Verb. Yes, nice. The soil shifted her, heart palpitating as she watched the pebbles fall away underfoot, hoping to whatever god there might be that they didn't hear it. She clung to clumps of dry grass as she climbed, burrs prickling her calloused hands, gnawing at her wound. This is her hand wound. Cresting the top, she lingered for a moment, just for a second to see if they had given chase, but they were still inside. Taking a sweet and deep breath of relief, she began to trek back down to her dirt bike. The return trip was short, but her legs weakened from the climb. I'm going to stop there because we're now with cut scenes. So, but they didn't hear it. So, I was under the impression that she'd been spotted, which is why I suggested this. So earlier on, once Leanna makes her way outside, have her see that the spoops, the monsters, aliens, sorry, are there, but that they don't notice her. This is crucial because we have a uh-oh kind of moment. We have an uh-oh moment. If you have oh, they definitely heard that. I was 100% primed and ready for Leanna to be seen by the outriders and for her to flee, but it doesn't happen. And then we get this, and it feels almost anticlimactic. So simple fix, just either change this or have a little scene where there's this awkward have they seen me? That's what you need. You need like a heart in the mouth moment. Great opportunity to add great to add a moment where Leanna isn't sure if they have seen her. Definitely do this. Not so much because it's a great idea, but just because it ties into the structure a bit neater. And then we can get rid of this paragraph and oh well, we don't have to get rid of it, but you reconfigure how it works then. The emotion of this paragraph then will be less on will be more on stealth and escape rather than what I was primed for, which was a crazy, blind, panic-stricken run. So I won't comment too much more on that. I think this needs a little bit of tweaking before it gets to the before we can really start to pick apart line by line what's going on here. I'm gonna make a comment about praying to summit. It's an interesting turn of phrase. In its unusualness, perhaps it detracts. Hey, pandas from Mars. Hello, welcome. Yeah, this is a bit of a quiet evening, isn't it? It's just you and me. Bit unusual, right? But yeah, thanks for dropping in. Maybe everyone's having a lazy Thursday. Which is totally fine. I'm gonna have a lazy Thursday too. I'm gonna finish this little page and a beat here, and then call it a night, because I'm tired. My energy is low. Oh, hello OutriderSG. Oh my goodness, everyone's coming. Yay, I've just doubled my viewership in a minute. You and me, title of your sex tape. Well, I mean, it has to be 2 for sex at least, right? You fell asleep waiting. Oh no. I'll give you a bit of a summary about what we've talked about. So tracks from the emotion of the scene. Everyone's coming, that's better. That's not a bad name for a sex tape. Not a bad name at all. So Outrider, hi, welcome. Good to see you. What we've been doing tonight is just a little bit of reconfiguring of Let's talk about this now that you're here. Sorry for people who have just been listening. Oh, they definitely heard that, she said, a grimace on her face. This part here, we're on page 9 of 12. When I read this, I was 100% ready for like a run scene. Like a scene where Leanna sees her threat, the threat sees her, and there's this horrible moment of like alien screech, the Outriders power up and they spark and blue, and then she runs away. But what happens instead is that we actually get 3 paragraphs worth of block description of the Outriders, which is nice in like a line by line visual sense. But I don't know if, because of this impression here, I don't feel as though it fits the tone and the tenor of what we're going for. So I wrote this out and I made a bit of a like a sort of preamble about, you know, you don't have to write like this or anything, but and across the dusty road, this is when Leanna rolls to safety and her ramp crumbles and but she's okay. And across the dusty road, a fearsome sight came to Leanna and made her eyes bristle. The Outriders, life in fuzzy creatures, like heat mirages, like the tricks of shadows. But when Leanna caught sight of their cycles, blah 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 blah, she knew she was in trouble. And then she runs, because I was under the impression that the monsters were, so aliens, thank you, that they were going to see her. That they were going to be like, yeah, there's a human there. And then Leanna would be like, yeah, that's me. And then she'd run. But it didn't happen. And because I was primed for it, this comes as like a complete handbrake on the pace of the scene. So I made a couple of comments here about how it's nice, but it slows down the scene too much. I suggested maybe making it a lot shorter. And then she just goes away. And it's because, like, reading this paragraph here, we don't get a moment where Leanna announces to the narrator, or the narrator has a scope over the scene and says to the reader, but the aliens haven't seen her. So we definitely need to include that somewhere. But have the aliens seen her? This is really important because it affects the following paragraph. Maybe Leanna has seen things in her life. You don't know what she has been through, Lyrebird. Not one bit. That's true. I am prejudging Leanna's experience with aliens and motorcycles. Hovering motorcycles. This may be the most natural thing to her in the world. And you know, she may react differently. in a sort of weird personal events kind of way. But you also raise an interesting point too, in a roundabout fashion, about how the delivery of this will affect how Leanna reacts. Will determine how we as readers should react. When we were dealing with Shavin's story over the last streams before Sean's, I was constantly looking for clues as to how the magic in the world was received by the main character, because me as a reader empathizes through the main character with the events of the world. So in the same way, I feel like Leanna needs a little bit of even a bit of narrational interjection every now and then so that we can gauge. Cool. You can definitely have room to invert that expectation exactly how you want. What I feel needs to happen though is we need like a little scene where there's this awkward moment of, holy shit, that was a big noise, have they seen me? But no, they haven't. And so Leanna just walks away. Totally fine to do that, that's actually quite interesting. But we need to be primed for it. And this doesn't prime me for that. This primes me for like a balls to the wall kind of run kind of scene, but it doesn't eventuate. Yeah, really simple fixes. It's just about not, oh, like, you can push for one thing, like oh, just strap yourself in, this is gonna be exciting, and then have her be like, oh, but they didn't hear me, okay, I'm gonna go over here. That's actually okay if you want to have like the bait and switch, totally fine, but we need the switch because the switch never came. Understand plot armor. Maybe the alien just didn't care. It's like, I am as a human. Or maybe the alien is like, I know how this story ends. I'm not gonna bother chasing down that human. All sorts of like metafiction possibilities. Let's keep going. The transition out of this paragraph into this one may work a little better now that we know what the intention is. Also, hi, OutriderSG, Pandas from Mars, tell me how you are. I hope you've both been well. And hopefully not too sleepy. I feel like this is a very sleepy stream tonight. The theme of tonight's stream is sleep. Because I will be asleep in like an hour's time. I'm gonna close down the stream as soon as I finish this. Yep, definitely. Aliens and beasts who understand plot armor. That's an interesting kind of prompt, isn't it? And you have to maneuver your way through the story. Yes, that'd be very interesting. Oh no, that's a bit too deep. My heart goes out to you. In the words of Celine Dion, I hope it's Celine Dion. Let me check it before I wreck it. You may be too young to remember the Titanic movie, but Celine Dion had this lovely song saying, "My heart will go on." I don't think it's about breakups and like recovery from a breakup, but it's a nice song. So I feel for you. And, you know, I could offer you lots of platitudes like, oh, there are plenty of fish in the sea, you'll find someone eventually, but it feels like a dark cloud, doesn't it? And the last thing that can kind of help is like some sprinkling in some goodness. Sometimes you just need to sort of let that dark cloud mellow for a bit, so yeah, my heart goes out to you. I hope you're okay. And Outrider is fine. We've got some polar opposites here, just like in new writing. Did you? Ah, okay, cool, nice. Yeah, I saw it in the theaters too. So maybe we're about the same age then. Good movie. I like Titanic. It reminds me of his Flash Fusions between sorry. Really? Was it? Huh. Interesting. Hmm. Yeah. No, it's not a sob story if it has real emotional substantive content. I sort of feel like people use the word sob story for like contrived events, but you know, if it's a real thing for you and it's obviously emotional, so no, I wouldn't call it a sob story. Mobile. If you can't paste it through stream chat, then paste it into Discord too. Let's deal with this now. The return trip was short, but her legs, weakened from the climb, were already threatening to quit. The heat was taking its toll, her body lagging with fatigue. It was overruled by her hard will, but only barely. Her feet carried her only for Her feet carried her only as far as needed and no further. She reached the ditch, half a mile out from the intersection. She let out a pinched breath, anxious to leave. Had the bike been ridden any closer, she'd have run the risk of drawing unwanted attention. Not that it made a difference now. Leanna swept the branches away and dusted off the bike. It hadn't been touched. She dragged it from the ditch. Ah, so she's not on the bike. Sorry. Ah, that's why I got confused. I assumed she'd already found the bike, and we'd skipped a little bit. The return trip being on bike. I don't know why I got that impression, but do with that what you will. I'm not sure if other people will get that. Just something to note. Talking feelings with Lyrebird. This is like late night Dr. Lyrebird. I will be a doctor one day, so I could be like a doctor of feelings. Come to me with your emotional problems, and I'll be like, well, I've got a PhD in molecular biology and love, so I can help you out there. Maybe not with a direct love, but just maybe with advice on love. I'm qualified for it. Don't question me. I've got a doctorate. Mm. Mm. All we need is whiskey, a double barrel, and a fireplace. That definitely sounds like a classic writing prompt. Like, very typical writing prompt fodder. She dragged it from the ditch and hopped on, her foot sliding into place over the pedal. Her jacket, a faded brown leather, smooth and warm, dangled out of the basket on the side. Slipping her arms into the sleeves felt comfortable, familiar. She leaned forward with old instincts, kicked down with confidence against the starter, twisting back on the throttle. Quick and light, the engine spluttered. Shit! Trying again, the engine struggled but roared to life, drowning like a swarm of cicadas, sorry. That's the right way to say it, cicadas, as the gas fed into the line. Dirt and grass kicked up behind the bike as the tires peeled out into the dry soil until finding their grip. The dusty ruins of the city laid dead ahead. A craggy cliff with rocky outcrops, the only obstacle, a slender trail snaking down its deep inclines. It was safer that way, if only by a margin. She'd seen how well outriders performed over a rough terrain, but they were even more ferocious over pavement where patrols occurred frequently. She'd been riding for several minutes before allowing herself to ease off the gas. The right way to say that. drifting it at just a few miles per hour. Leanna had never been within spitting distance of one of these malicious titans before, let alone two of them. Her hands were shaking, chill as the winter even, which she hadn't noticed until that moment. The bleeding had slowed to a trickle. The cut would need to be cleaned and soon, but all things considered she felt in good shape. Happy to be free of thirst, happy to be out of that place, lucky to be alive. But something didn't feel right. Good, so we'll stop there, because this is chunky. Key elements here. Yeah, right. It's hitting me too, actually. But I've got to write the damned thesis before I can be a doctor, so... Docbird? Yeah, also good. It is a classic supervillain name. Pandas from Mars raises a really good point here about shaky hands leading into... where was the shaky hands? My hands are shaking. It would probably... Good spotting from pandas from Mars. In addition to that, shit. I'm gonna make it the comment here. Starting up a cycle would create a huge wash of noise, and we're uncertain as readers if Leanna is worried about this affecting it affect her writing. Affect to cause and effect. Affecting the safety. Can the aliens hear her? It's a really stupid point, because it's like, obviously they can't, that's why she's doing it, but it's one of those things where the reader has a little disconnect where they have to fill in that gap themselves, and not strictly in a good way, it's just more in like a sort of in a gapped sense. Yeah, I think there's a little work to do with some of the elements of this chapter. Just before you go with reconfiguring and cutting, I think the best piece of advice I have for you is to have a think about... I made a huge comment somewhere about this here. Yeah, if you just click on alternative, it'll be this one here. This is kind of what I want think you to have churning in your head as you go through. It's not so much you know, fitting all the pieces together. You're more than capable of doing that and just reconfiguring your scene, word choices, those sorts of things, because you're a good writer. What I think is like a next level kind of suggestion is to think about, now that you've got the elements in place for Lego blocks, have a think about how the narrative voice is affecting the impact of the story. Once you've cleaned everything up, then have a think about whether or not um, the one step removed narrator style of narration is giving the emotional effect that you want, or if you'd rather have the camera of events a little more tightly focused with Leanna. I could be totally fine with either. We just need to have a think about how it's emotionally impactful and how it's delivered. Yeah. Yeah. That's also like a nice little follow-on point as well, like the adrenaline through her body with her pained hand. I can suggest a couple of things. Your temperature from the camera already threatening to quit. I like threatening to quit. I always like seeing that, actually. The heat was taking its toll, her body lagging with fatigue, which was overruled by her hard will, but only barely. I think this is one of those instances where, despite the narrator's style of telling events, I feel like this is perhaps too direct and plain. We need to inject... Did I spell plain correctly? No, plain. There we go. We need to inject more emotion into these facts. And make Leanna feel them rather than the reader simply reading about them. Her feet carried her only as far as needed and no further. See, this would be better if this was more emotional, because you don't have to change this. Even though it still has the same problem as this, it's all about contrasts and about the sparsity with which you do showing and telling and displaying information. So if this is a bit more emotive, this doesn't need to be then. But together, like back to back, they're quite factual. As she reached the ditch, like, this is of course in my opinion, and feel free to disagree. I just feel as though we need a little bit more emotion injected in. As she reached the ditch, half a mile out from the intersection, she let out a pinched breath, anxious to leave. Had the bike been ridden any closer, she'd have run the risk of drawing unwanted attention, but it made a difference now. So this bleeds into the shared point that I was talking about here. So you can kind of ignore what I said. So I'm going to delete that comment actually because it's irrelevant. I'd love there to be like a short, like, whew, she's safe, like a breath. You've got it here. She let out a pinched breath, anxious to leave. Because the anxious to leave is here. Maybe a sigh of relief, although stereotypical would be maybe a bit of a better fit here. That helps the reader get back into a calmer phase of the story. That's a good point. The adrenaline crash. Yeah, good point. Let's keep it in mind. Just for the sake of authenticity. It may also be relief as well as adrenaline. Yeah, the one-step remove thing is what bugged me with this story from the start. I think... There's no right answer. There's just an answer that you're comfortable with. You're in control of a story and it's your voice. I don't really care where, like, one way or another. I just want a convincing story. I want to feel as though it's convincing, so the best way to do that is for you to be convinced if it's right or wrong, because otherwise it's hard to keep your uncertainty from leaking into the narrative, because then it becomes maybe a little bit inconsistent. So, I mean, have a think about whether or not you want it to be more action-focused, more Leanna-focused, more in tune with her emotional state, in tune with her physical state. Or if you want to do a bit more of a one-step removed thing, which is totally fine, it has its own charm to it. There are some really nice parts up here where the narrator kind of pushes in these different sort of turns of phrases almost, and I think it works. So just find what you're comfortable with and run with it. Don't be afraid to sort of try new things too. Hey, Herringbone, hello! How are you doing? Good day to you. No worries about a short stay. I'm going to, I think, come to a conclusion pretty soon. I'd say within the next 15-20 minutes. So, stay for as long as you like. Why is this whole thing green? So we don't have a, oh, come on, yeah. We don't have a sense of we don't have a built scene here for us to play with. So these details pop into existence. Like, if it's behind a tree, ground the tree first, then go to it. And dusted off the bike, it hadn't been touched, she dragged it from the ditch and hopped on, her foot sliding into place over the pedal, her jacket does this, slipping arms into the comfortable familiar, she leaned forward with old instincts kicked down with confidence, starting again, the engine spluttered but roared, trying to bees, turning just into those peeled out into dry soil until finding their grip, the dusty ruins of the sea lay ahead. This is a very big 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's kind of like an 8-line Leanna gets on her bike. Line by line, there's nothing strictly too wrong with it, but let me illustrate this point by doing this. In a chapter of 4.2k isn't a huge scene to deal with, but keep in mind that we're currently in the anti-climax phase of the chapter. After the monsters, we kind of need a quicker push into the next chapter or idea, and I don't feel as though we have the luxury of 8 lines here to describe what can be condensed down into a sentence. Down into Leanna gets on her bike. I don't want to be too harsh here by any stretch, because I quite like it. Like, if this was a scene of like, I'd probably still suggest cutting it down a little bit. But if it was at the start of the chapter, I'd be on board with it. I'd be like, yep, this is cool, you know, we're establishing the scene. But because we're in the anticlimax phase of a chapter, I don't really want any more elongated dumps of extraneous information. So I feel as though this is more of a structural critique rather than a line-by-line thing. It's fine functionally. Sorry, it's fine in a writing sense, but in a story sense, it might be a little bit unnecessary. That being said, there's some cool detail here about her jacket, which she obviously has an emotional connection with. So if you keep one thing, keep the jacket. Keep a jacket. That's good emotional character detail. Yeah, that's probably the best thing there in this paragraph, I think. The dusty ruin, I've cut here because the dusty ruins of the city laid dead ahead. Laid dead ahead. Maybe put stood dead ahead or grew in the distance. I'll let you maybe read this again and see if you think of something else. A craggy cliff. Nailed it! With rocky outcrops, the only obstacle, a slender trail snaking down its steep incline. It was safer that way, if only by a margin. She'd seen how well Outriders performed over rough terrain, but they were even more ferocious over pavement, where patrols occurred frequently. So she's kind of sizing up the landscape. Students have had the tendency to declare sensations, like an observer making note of it, rather than letting the reader feel the emotion. I've noticed the same thing too, yeah. Not necessarily a bad point, Outrider, it's, but it does mean that the story has a couple of parts where I want to step into Leanna's shoes, and I don't get that opportunity, and I feel as though I'm a bit distant from her. So there's a downside to that sort of thing. Yeah. Definitely, I think that'd be a decent place to start a new chapter, actually. especially if there's nothing at the end here that's like suddenly monsters everywhere. If you don't have like an uptick at the end, we may do. I haven't got there yet, but if it's just like if it's the anticlimax of the scene, consider shortening the anticlimax part. Yep. I don't know what to suggest here. It's a regrounding of the scene. I'll let you deal with this once the edit sort of pushes through. We've got details here about the bleeding hand, but can't need to be cleaned. I think this can all be sort of pushed together and reevaluated, but I'll let you do that. Something didn't feel right. She felt the impending hunger of watchful eyes creep up her back, lurching over her shoulder. She was petrified, afraid to ook. Yes, look at this. That's awesome. How do you even do that? They're not even anywhere close to each other on the keyboard. That's amazing. I love it. That's my new favorite thing. That's that's the highlight of this stream. How did that even happen? I'm trying to think if I've done anything equally as strange in my writing. I can't think of anything. Yeah, that'd be it. Oh, of course, it's a mobile thing. Yep. To confirm what you need to be true, but force yourself anyway. Afraid to look to confirm what you knew. Her job was justified. Trim plumes of dust swept toward the sky a few miles back. She couldn't hear their engines, not over the drone of her own bike. Her heart began to slam inside her chest like a bird trying to escape its cage. They had found her. It was then that it occurred to her how careless she had been. They saw her blood. They must have. A crimson betrayal pooled on the floor of the cafeteria. They would have known it was fresh, and someone had just been there. Let alone the commotion she'd stirred up. Left with no choice, Leanna ripped back on the throttle, pushing the bike to its limits, speeding towards the only place she could think to go. It would only delay the inevitable, she knew that, but she wasn't going to make it easy for them. After all, she had a promise to keep. I feel as though this here, this should go right after the she began the trek back to her dirt bike. Then push the motorbike detail to the start of the next chapter and add panic to it. That may be a really interesting way to start the new chapter. Without knowing what chapter 4 looks like, that suggestion may not be worthy, but have a think about whether... I think you'd be amenable to that idea, because I think you said something similar here before. That might be a better way to end it too. It shortens the tail end of this anticlimax, it feels like it's a more immediate sequence of events, and we don't have to receive as much information to drag out the scene, I suppose. Yeah. No worries. Good. Yeah, because this is good. It's a neat little end. I feel like as she's walking away to her bike, a point of safety, she looks back. Maybe have a sound trigger her instead of her. Maybe have a sound prick her interest instead of her initiating it. She's forced to look back as she's walking back to her cycle. She sees the twin pillars of smoke, and then she decides, okay, I gotta move, gotta get back to my cycle. That imbues it with a bit more emotion. After all, she had a promise to keep. Did we figure out what that promise was? Promise. No, we don't actually. I think... Do we have a sense... I feel like we definitely need it within these 4,000 words. Not a full description, just a glimmer just a glimpse of it, to help with the drive of the story, and to help with the drive of the story, and to help with the reader engaging emotionally with Leanna. And with that, I'm gonna stop. Good, good. I'm pleased with how this ended. And there's a huge amount to work with here too, which is really cool. The bare bones events of the story are really neat. It's interesting. I like how the pattern of motion works. I think there's a lot that I've suggested here. So I'm sorry if it's a real spaghetti of opinion and all sorts of different stuff together. So don't be overwhelmed by it. I think you've got like vast majority of this in the bag. You're in tune with what you'd like to change, and just from reading your comments here and keeping pace with everything, I think you know exactly how you can change it to make it stronger too. But yeah, thank you for sending over chapter 3. It's been a real pleasure to edit your story too. So this sounds exactly in a panic. She hops in the bag. Yep, good, nice. I like mystery. I like the sense that there's this hidden drive to her, but we need like a little hint of it to keep us going. One thing I will say, the present past narrative started off quite strong. Came back a little bit at the end, very briefly with when she remembers what the cycles are capable of, which is somewhere here. She has a memory of like a very short one sentence memory of what the cycles do. The point is that the present past interaction starts off quite strong, and then gets less and less important as the narrative pushes through. There's been a couple of moments every now and then, like when she first finds water, or if she's in the basement of this place with the glass doors, maybe something triggers her memory too. Keep working with little bits of it here and there, and that makes it more consistent. Great, we're done. Let's go to sleep. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you Pandas from Mars. Thank you OutriderSG for the story. Thank you Herringbone for popping in. Thank you to my lovely nephews for popping in at the very start of the stream with some lovely words. Good. Yeah. I think it'll be really strong once the rewording works. My pleasure, Outrider. Anytime. I'll catch you both later. Bye bye.